The Supreme Court has initiated suo motu contempt proceedings against the Delhi Development Authority. This in the case of 400 trees being chopped in Delhi's Ridge area, in the Sadbari area of the national capital. Remember, DDA had in fact admitted to this in an earlier hearing. Today in the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court bench said that this is amounting to violation of a court order. Remember, they had already junked a petition by the DDA when the government body had sought permission to chop more trees. But even after Supreme Court refused to give permission for that, DDA had gone ahead with axing several trees in the Ridge area. Now the Supreme Court has held them in contempt of their own order. And in fact, in the observations today in court, Supreme Court said that for each tree which had been axed, the DDA must plant 100 new trees. In fact, the Supreme Court has also asked the Indian Forest Survey to carry out file a report on exactly how many trees have been chopped in that Ridge area of Delhi. These are the visuals on your screen there from that area in the national capital. Let me go across to my colleague Ashish Bhargav for more on this. Ashish, this is an important development that we have been tracking from the Supreme Court. Take us through the highlights of the hearing today.
Yes, today, first DDA Vice Chairman filed an affidavit before Supreme Court and accepts, and he said he takes full responsibility of the act and omissions by the officials and field staff of DDA, which resulted in felling of 174 trees on non-forest land and 468 trees on forest land without the permission of Supreme Court. After this affidavit, reading this affidavit, Supreme Court Supreme Court slammed DDA Vice Chairman and told him this amount to contempt of court and issue suo motu criminal contempt against the Vice Chairman. Supreme Court also said he has to tell all the erring officers' name in the court and court will take action against them. Also, Supreme Court directed to DDA to stop all the road activities which is going on in South Range near Satbari. Also said their view is, prima facie view is, 100 trees must be planted for one cut tree. Also, Supreme Court asked foreign Indian Forest Survey with 3 independent experts to survey the area and file an preliminary report to Supreme Court. Supreme Court will take this matter again in the vacation on June 24. Supreme Court bench headed by Justice A. Ashok also said it must not be, this message should not go, only court are taking action against these felling of cutting of trees without permission. Supreme Court also directs MOEF to take action against violation of DDA.
Right.
Violation of the violation of law by the DDA. As Supreme Court will take another hearing on June 24th.
Right. The centre has also been told by the Supreme Court to take action on this matter. Ashish, thank you so much for joining us on that. I'm also joined by Mr. A.K. Jain, a former commissioner with the DDA. Sir, we were discussing this earlier, but now you can see that the Supreme Court has gone ahead and initiated contempt proceedings against the DDA. Not only is it embarrassing for the government body, but of course, the fact is that this sort of action which had been taken by the DDA of chopping around 400 trees in a city like Delhi, which is marked as one of the most polluted cities in the world, that is something that the Supreme Court has been very unsparing about in this case.
Yeah, I think this has been very unprecedented and also very embarrassing, because the very positive point of the DDA has always been criticized, but the very positive thing which DDA did was about 1/5 of the area, that means about 20% of the land which it has developed, has been kept for green development, trees, etc. This is as compared to Mumbai, which is having only 4% land under greenery, Calcutta about 7%, and even the garden city Bangalore, which is having about 1/8 or 13% of the land under greenery. DDA has always been developing greens, and according to the master plan, the Ridge having about 7,777 hectares of the area has been very sacrosanct, and no development, no construction has ever been allowed by the DDA in the ridge. Apart from the ridge, there are 9 biodiversity parks which DDA has developed. There are 4 regional parks are city forest, then 111 district parks, and more than 15,000 municipal parks have been developed by the municipal bodies, including DDA and the Cantonment Board and NDMC. So Delhi has always been known for its greenery, and it is very unfortunate that this kind of thing has happened. And I think the Supreme Court has given a shock to the DDA that it cannot be taken casually. And another point which I think is very important, that according to the DDA districts, we have to have about 10 square meter per capita, per person of the green cover in Delhi, which comes that if we have a population of 2 crores, 20 crore square meter of the area should be green. And what we have today is about only 15,000 hectare in place of 20,000 hectare. So we are already in shortage of the green area, and this green area is vital for converting carbon dioxide into oxygen, and we are already facing a serious crisis of air pollution and climate change. So we have to strengthen and enhance this greenery to a great extent.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us on this, Mr. Jain. I'm also joined by Aarti Khosla, an environmentalist. Aarti, how are you seeing this order from the Supreme Court? It is quite unprecedented, as Mr. Jain was also saying, that they have initiated contempt proceedings against the DDA for not following the Supreme Court's order on this matter. And remember, the Supreme Court has also said that the DDA actually committed a willful breach of its order.
Correct. And the fact that 400 trees have been cut and that's being cited as a mistake and an oversight, I think harsh as it may sound, it also sets a precedent of how we cannot count for such mistakes in the times that we are living in. So it sounds quite harsh at the moment, but this sharp disapproval, I think, by the Supreme Court is a clear expression that some things cannot go on. And, this is also a mindset issue. The fact that Mr. Panda's plea says that he was undergoing a surgical procedure, and which is why this happened. It's a mindset issue, which means across the spectrum of the levels of the organization, you need to have that mindset that you just don't cut 400 trees for the small benefit that they have to give you. So the trade-off has to be clear to everybody involved. And I think this suo motu cognizance that Supreme Court has taken in the matter really sets that precedence that environment is not to be compromised. Certainly development is not to be compromised, but there are certain wisdom calls that need to be taken when you're looking at just cutting 400 trees, and not just cutting, but also selling of green trees, as there has been evidence in this case. So in that case, this kind of an exercise and the harsh disapproval that it is receiving is mostly fitting, keeping in mind the pressure that Delhi already faces on its resources, the air pollution problem, the heat wave stress that we are reeling under, and every kind of environmental disaster that we tend to face one after the other.
Exactly. In fact, if I can just put out some other salient points which have come through from the Supreme Court today, where the court has in fact asked ordered for the road widening work to be stopped forthwith in that area. As I mentioned, also called it a willful breach of the Supreme Court order, and has now roped in the Indian Forest Survey to carry out, to bring a report in front of the Supreme Court to actually tell how many such trees have been chopped in the area. Mr. Jain, this, in your experience as having worked in the DDA, this sort of an order, of course, is a major embarrassment, not only an embarrassment for the DDA, as we mentioned, but the fact is that this would also be seen as a precedent in the way government bodies actually work. It's not just about flouting the Supreme Court order, but the fact is that the government agencies themselves have to be more conscientious of the fact that pollution is a major problem. It's actually impinging on a person's human rights, as we also discussed earlier, if trees are felled to such a large extent.
judgment.
Mr. Jain, if you could hear my question.
That the Supreme Court in its judgment in March on climate change has very clearly said that it is a human right and it can be seen as a fundamental right, the right to the greenery, right to the clean air, right to the proper climate. So I think from that point of view, we have to be more serious, at least from planning point of view, that we try to maximize the green cover and don't damage any greenery or cutting up the trees. It's I think, a very criminal kind of activity which should not be tolerated.
Going back to Aarti Khosla there, Aarti, this is of course a Supreme Court order, but do you expect that the agencies will work more in tandem with the spirit of the order which has come from the Supreme Court? Because earlier as well, we saw DDA actually flouting a Supreme Court order which denied the permission to them to actually chop those trees.
Well, I would imagine that DDA already deeply regrets such a lack of coordination, and if anything, then coming from the Supreme Court, this should actually set a certain precedent on how certain decisions have to be taken and how norms have not to be flouted. We also remain eternal optimists, and we really live in hope. So my sensibility does say that after so much has happened and so much water is over the bridge, at least now the DDA should be able to act in coordination. And, we can keep talking non-stop about the importance of trees and the benefit of trees, but that doesn't need scientific data. It just needs common sense to realize. So just doing the bare minimum and presenting what DDA is doing just in terms of minimum viable product of coordination, I think is the least that they can do, especially with the ruckus that has been now created with something that sounds so counterintuitive to do.
Mr. A.K. Jain and Aarti Khosla there, thank you so much for joining us on this top story that we were focusing on.